So, hello to everyone. I'm Melody Brown-Berkins. I am the director of the Institute of Arctic Studies in the John Sloan Dickey Center for International Understanding, and we are so excited to have an incredible event, and thank you all for coming on this beautiful day and coming on inside for what will be a wonderful event with some visitors we have here from Iqaluit in Nunavut, northern Canada. It is just an honor for the Institute of Arctic Studies to have these kinds of events, to convene these kinds of opportunities, to bring in new knowledge, new ideas, to share with. They've met this group that you're going to hear a little bit about, has met with faculty, has met with students, has met with partners across campus. And this is led by our Canada Fulbright Arctic Research Chair, or Kenneth Fulbright Chair in Arctic Studies, Dr. Gwen Qaujigiartiit, who grew up and was born and raised in Iqaluit, Nunavut, where she continues to work and raise her family and brought them right down here to us while she's doing her Canada Fulbright event here at Dartmouth. She is the executive and scientific director of the, I'm working on it, Qaujigiartiit Health Research Centre in Iqaluit, Nunavut. She is also an assistant professor at the Northern Ontario School of Medicine, an associate professor of the Faculty of Medicine at the Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador. Her research has and continues to focus on elevating the pathways and well-being that exist in Arctic communities to address local health concerns. And she co-founded this Community Health Research Centre in 2006 with an elder. And the goal of this program is to enable health research to be conducted locally by Nunavummiut in a supportive, safe, culturally grounded, and ethical environment. The center promotes a model in which Inuit knowledge and Western science knowledge are incorporated into all projects. So we have Dr. Qaujigiartiit here going to lead this panel with us on a project that they are calling right now, what does community-led Arctic research and scholarship really look like? This will be a panel discussion where hopefully you will learn quite a lot. I have been learning quite a lot all this week. And the panelists with Dr. Qaujigiartiit include Sephora Mearns, who is the director of the Nunavut NEIHR, the Network Environment for Indigenous Health Research. She is Nunavut's first center for Inuit scholarship and early career researchers. And it also will include Nancy Mike, who is originally from Penigtuk, Nunavut. She currently calls Apex Iqaluit her home and where she lives with her 4 children. She's trained in Arctic nursing and has practiced as an emergency room nurse before joining the Health Research Center as a researcher working on family and community health. We also have here other folks from the north. We have come down here are Lauren Nevin, Tracy Wallace, and Mariah Salafi. So we've had this group of Indigenous knowledge holders, of researchers, scholars, practitioners, community-engaged health folks here at Dartmouth this week, and we are very honored to have you here. We are also very, very lucky today to have a representative, because this is the Canada Fulbright Research Chair in Arctic Studies. We have from the Consul General of Canada to the United States in Boston, on behalf of the Consul General Roger Kusner, the Senior Officer for Public and Economic Affairs, Michael Pizziferi. And I wanted to turn the mic over to him just briefly. We're so happy you're here. Thank you for making the trip. It really is a testament to the United States-Canadian partnership and our shared interest and understanding of how we work together on all issues across issues of from security and health to well-being to climate change to economic development and social entrepreneurships, things we were just talking about. So thank you for being here, and thank you for helping us support this Canada Fulbright Arctic Research Chair. Let me give you over to the mic.
I'll do my best also to speak into the mic, but it's an honor for me to be here this afternoon with all of you on behalf of the Consul General of Canada, Roger Kusner, and the Consulate General of Canada in Boston, which represents Canada in the 5 of the 6 states in New England. We leave Connecticut to our friends in New York. I manage our academic partnerships at the consulate. I wear a few different hats, but I manage our academic partnerships, and I'm also responsible for our diversity, equity, and inclusion accreditation file, which is a new file for our office on the East Coast. And I want to thank, first of all, Dr. Melody Berkins for the invitation here today, and the Institute of Arctic Studies for always partnering with the consulate. I'm really looking forward to this dialogue from QHRC and the Nunavut Network Environment for Indigenous Health Research, and really the work being done by these organizations. And you don't need me to tell you this because you're here, but the Canadian government really believes that this work is essential, and we're really proud to be here just to listen and to support this opportunity in these types of conversations. And I'll share just a little bit, and then I want to turn it over to the panel about Canada's Arctic policy. And I'm happy to talk about that a little bit, though I started, as I said, 2 months ago, so I'm by no means an expert. But really the Arctic and Northern framework, Northern policy framework is a long-term vision for guiding the Government of Canada's priorities, activities, and investments in the Arctic and the North all the way until 2030. And this framework really started, which I think is important to note, from an understanding that Canada's Arctic and Indigenous residents, Northern residents, especially Indigenous peoples, have not had access to the same services, opportunities, and standards that other Canadians enjoy. And we have to be honest and upfront about that, and that includes the tools of self-determination. And over the years, there have been a lot of policies designed to bridge these gaps between what exists in the Arctic and what other Canadians take for granted. But in order to bridge those gaps, I think we have to recognize, and we did attempt to recognize in unveiling this policy, that a made-in-Ottawa approach is not sufficient for meeting these gaps and understanding how to do this work for the benefit of people across the country. So a key objective of the framework and a key objective of the role that I play at the consulate now and of the government as a whole's approach to these types of issues is to support reconciliation, which is the process by which the Government of Canada is working to renew the relationship with Indigenous peoples on the basis of recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. We now have a framework that pursues what we hope is a common vision for strong, vibrant communities working together in a spirit of mutual respect for a resilient, healthy, prosperous, sustainable, and secure Arctic and Northern region. We're now in the co-implementation phase of that strategy, but there remains a lot more work to do, and that's why conversations like this are so important. And the support of an institution like Dartmouth is essential for continuing those conversations. So I'll just note, I guess, that international scientific collaboration of the type that is happening this week and with Gwen here since January helps address some of those knowledge gaps, but particularly it's important given the complexities to Arctic science that you'll hear about a little bit here. In addition to health and other outcomes, we also know that science and research, of course, play an essential role in the battle against climate change, which is a major focus for what Canada's efforts are in the Arctic. And we're ensuring, first of all, that Northerners are involved in those Arctic research projects from conception to delivery to ensure that the best new knowledge is created. And for the same reasons, Canada is deeply committed to leveraging Indigenous knowledge to enhance results with Western science. Just one example is the Canadian High Arctic Research Station, which is a world-class Arctic research campus based in Cambridge Bay, which supports this enhanced way of knowing. And with local support, we believe that scientists both can recognize and co-create meaningful results with and for Indigenous communities. And we're encouraging U.S. scientists, which Dr. Berkins and I spoke about briefly, but we're encouraging U.S. scientists from both Arctic and non-Arctic states interested that are in these issues to visit that campus. And that's why the consulate in Boston is here, is to continue promoting that type of dialogue and that type of collaboration. And Dr. Berkins mentioned this briefly, but I will just touch before I close on the U.S.-Canada partnership and how essential that is for the work that we're doing in the Arctic. Our Canadian federal, provincial, and territorial governments are, of course, aware, as are the people who live in the Arctic, that it's very tough to talk about the Arctic without also noting the context of global security and global security challenges, especially in the Arctic. And in March, President Biden was in Ottawa meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau, which I think was a moment for anyone who followed it that sort of reminded us of the special relationship that exists between Canada and the United States. But of course, one of the topics they discussed was the Arctic. And they talked about the vulnerability of the Arctic's ecosystem that we all share and how to fight climate change by committing to reducing emissions and helping communities develop renewable energy technologies. And they committed to advancing both conservation, environmental protection, and resilience, always in partnership and in consultation with the peoples who call the Arctic home. And we do hope that the U.S.'s own policies, which are being developed by the Biden administration and have begun to be revealed, will be inspired in some ways by the 2019 framework that Canada developed. And so I hope, just to leave with you all here, I will be listening in the audience and looking forward to learning a lot more. But please do know that the Consulate General of Canada in Boston is here as a partner. We're here to hopefully support these types of ongoing collaborations and cooperation, and we hope to see a lot more of these types of conversations moving forward. So thank you all for having us here, for letting us be a part of this event, and look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My next job is to turn off this mic and turn on. I think I can do this.
Yeah, it's on.
Tusak salva? Yeah, okay. Gwen hili akiaro yunga, ikalang mutaw yunga, isumnokto yunga Qaujigiartiit Nunavut. Amalu Qaujigiartiit yunga Fulbright Kanatomi. My name's Gwen Healy Akearo, and I come from Iqaluit. I'm the Executive and Scientific Director of the Qaujigiartiit Health Research Centre, which I'll speak about today. And as everyone's already said, I'm the Fulbright Canada Research Chair in Arctic Studies. And I'm just really pleased to be here with my colleagues this week. I've been so homesick, so it's been wonderful to have them here with me since I've been here since January with my family. We've been very wonderfully welcomed here as guests on Abenaki territory. We've had wonderful conversations with people from the surrounding communities and from Dartmouth. We've had great engagements with students that have made us so excited and inspired with lots of new ideas. So thank you everyone for being so welcoming and for being such gracious hosts. It's been very special for us. So I just get to use this right now? Okay, yeah. So the way we've structured our panel for you today is I'm going to talk a little bit about Qaujigiartiit, our institute and our approach and our context. And Sephora's going to come up and speak about our NEAR, our Nunavut NEAR, which is going to give you an example of Inuit scholarship and research in action and what that looks like for our students and our early career researchers. And then Nancy's going to round it all out with a discussion about Inuit, which is a heart-centered approach and process for creating a capable human being, we've developed a program around this that's come out of the evidence that has been generated through research at our institution. So we're going to take it from the big picture right down into a program that takes place in our communities. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Iqaluit, and I'm formally trained as an epidemiologist and public health researcher. I'm heart trained by Iqaluit, by the people of Iqaluit who have and continue to teach me and help me understand what it means to be well, how we look at health and how we understand it, and how we support everyone around us to feel their best. I've worked in circumpolar health, I guess,
since 2002, although that number just starts to seem farther and farther away. That can't be right. But I worked on I was an intern through a Canadian federal government program that stuck Northerners in other northern countries for internships and experience. I worked with the University of the Arctic in its early years, and then that really inspired me, seeing what was around the Arctic and other countries, to go home. And I went to grad school and I co-founded Qaujigiartiit with one of our late elders, Andrew Taraq Sr., in 2006. And I'm the mother of two. You know, we're our professional selves, but we're also human beings. And I have two beautiful daughters. And I love to sew and fish and camp and be out on the land. And that's missing the spring at home right now. It's just... now all your bugs are coming out in New Hampshire, and it's blah. It's too much for me. One of the challenges we face, I think, as Northerners, certainly in the Canadian North, is, and when we're engaging in different circles around the Arctic, is that we're often confronted with narratives that don't recognize that communities people live in the Arctic, that it's very, very well occupied. And so these are two examples of maps, of the Arctic region and of Polinias that are in various Arctic publications that don't name the communities or don't acknowledge the fact that this is the homeland for many people. This is a Canadian map. It's a nice one because all the communities are named in the mother tongue of the people who live there all around the Arctic. It's one we like to use quite a lot, which does actually make that acknowledgement. And then coming down into our region, not too long ago, let's say 10 years ago, a Canadian publication called the Globe and Mail, some of you may be familiar with it, it's a national newspaper, did a spread on how Canada's North was the final frontier and sort of painted the North as this vast, empty space. And this map is from a project. You can check out all the other maps, the references at the bottom, that was conducted by a researcher from the Scott Polar Research Institute at Cambridge and hunters in Nunavut. And they used GPS trackers to see all the different places that people were traveling through the seasons. And as you can see in this map, it's not an empty space, right? These are our sea ice superhighways, and we don't have the roads, but we have the boat travel, travel over the snow and over the ice. And these lines represent the web of connections between our communities. They represent the lines to food and harvesting areas, to places of significance, to the stories, old and new. They represent in many ways, the essence of our communities, those connections and those relationships. And so here we are. Hopefully, everybody knows where Qaujigiartiit is, Baffin Island. So that's where our center is located. We work across the territory of Nunavut, and we work with partners all across the Arctic. And there are two institutes that are quite similar to ours in the Northwest Territories and the Yukon that we work with from time to time on shared issues of importance across Canada's north. But our main office is located here in Iqaluit. And so Qaujigiartiit means looking for knowledge. It was the name given to our center by the late Andrew Taraq Sr. in the early days of our creation as an organization. And, our organization set out to kind of grew out of a climate of research at the time where people were coming in and studying what was of interest to them and then leaving and not knowing where the data goes or how it's being used or where it's represented. And so the center sort of grew out of the need for our communities to answer our own questions in a way that's respectful and responsive, and also house the data so it can be used in a meaningful way, right? So that in the beginning, that was how Qaujigiartiit really kind of came about, was to create this space. But now over the years, we're in our 18th year of operations, and our goal is to build on that, to create the programs that come from the evidence, to elevate Inuit pathways to well-being into our systems, to to generate the evidence that affects systems change. So it's continues to grow and expand in all different ways. And so as part of that, one of the things Andrew used to say is, we're taking ways of knowing from north, south, east, west, it doesn't matter, as long as we're all working for the common good, for the collective good of our communities, that we all are capable of sharing a strength that we have, of contributing in some way that makes the lives of others better. We're capable of listening, of observing, and so our center works to create a space where people can come together to do that, to bring strengths, to seek solutions, to move forward. So that involves Inuit epistemologies and methods and Western ones. It involves Inuit innovation and traditional academic approaches. Like, everything sort of comes together in a safe place and in a safe way, ultimately because we're coming together to improve the health of our future generations. We want everyone to be well and feel well, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and so on. So I put this up because this is what everybody sees about the North. Everybody knows what we have on the screen? Yeah? What is it? Narwhals, yeah. Narwhals, Tugalik. And the beautiful National Geographic photos, the pristine water and ice, we see a food source. You know, this is a very important food source in our communities. So in many ways, when we're talking about health and well-being, we're talking about continuing relationships with the land and places of significance and animals of significance that contribute nutritious food, that are part of a cycle of learning between family members and children in terms of harvesting practices, and understanding the role as stewards and caretakers for the land and animals. That is a reciprocal relationship, is at the heart of a holistic health and well-being model that exists in our communities. And as part of that circle of nurturing and education, the schools starting very young. Our schools have programs, land programs for kids that sort of build on what families may be doing in their own home. But this is a photo of the beach area in Qaujigiartiit. So this is beach that's been frozen over with sea ice, and then all the bumpy stuff out there is the pack ice, the sea ice that's frozen in the winter. And this is a group of kindergartners and grade ones and families and teachers and the school, and they're all getting ready to leave out on the land for the day. And the kids will have the most wonderful time, they always do. And they come back home tired and with fresh faces and fresh air. And on these days, you know, parents are hunting ptarmigan and kids are sliding and people share food together. And that, it's just the most beautiful representation of health and well-being. There's relationships growing and building. There's the relationship to the land. There's food sharing that happens. It's not just, they're going on a trip, you know, for the day, or it's not like it's a field trip. It's absolutely at the essence of a health and well-being model. So kids are at the heart of a lot of what we do, right? Families, children, we're constantly talking about how we teach them and train them from a young age, not just in terms of how to harvest or how to share or how to take care of others, but, you know, working at school and paying attention to neighbors and shoveling snow and all of those things that help cultivate Inuit, which is what Nancy's going to talk about in children. Further to the idea of the talking about holism in health and well-being, even terminology in Inuktitut like medical terminology, can be related to the land in some way. So this is an example of some terminology that is trying to describe when someone is sick, but also is also used to describe relation to the land. So outbook, for example, is like melting snow and also a nosebleed, right? And this is a quote from my namesake, Alice. also. And here she is. And so when we're thinking about research and education and teaching and learning and knowledge, like in the big frame of reference, how that actually takes place in our institute, Sephora will speak more about, but elders are part of our courses as instructors, that there's always some food component here, that we're gathering together and telling stories and learning from each other, and that can involve oral storytelling, presentations. It can involve art and creativity. Like all of those methods and forms of expression are valid in the epistemology we work within. And this is who we're working for. At the end of the day, as researchers, we're not working for ourselves. We're working for the generations to come. So they don't have faces yet because they haven't yet come to be. And so that's who we keep at the forefront of our work. That's who we serve, who we're working for, who we want to see healthy and strong and capable. So we're very much, if you haven't figured it out yet, we're very much a strengths-based organization. And we reiterate that numerous times because many of the dominant narratives about Canada's North are deficit-based. So we hear a lot, all the things that are wrong about our communities, but we're telling everyone very strongly all the things that are right and that are very strong. And we're often told also that we don't have capacity, and we would argue that we have so much capacity, it overflows. We just don't have systems that release it appropriately. And so our organization also exists to help cultivate that. The systems and the programs and the structures that will release the capacity that exists in our communities. And so how we do that in a research model for people who are interested in research models and methods and theory is through the concept of Qaujigiartiit, which is working together for the common good. And so when Andrew and I were first creating the center, we knew everything was going to be done differently, and there would be a set of values that would be guiding all our work in those early days. Like what is it about research in our communities that's different than what people had been doing up to that point, coming in and out? And so first of all, we're working for the common good. We're working for everybody else. Qaujigiartiit is a concept that's often translated as just being respectful. Just be respectful. But one of our elders sort of talked about it more in terms of respecting our shared humanity as human beings on the planet, on planet Earth. And so that we're working with that understanding that we have a shared humanity. Qaujigiartiit is the concept of storytelling and the power and meaning of story. Our community members all speak through story. There's lessons in old stories and in new stories. Stories are at the heart of every project we ever work on, like narratives, old stories, recordings, in some way, shape, or form, story is everywhere. Qaujigiartiit is this idea, Andrew used to say, it's taking everything you've known since kindergarten and then just, I understand. Just coming to a place of realization. And it's a lot like it's like analysis, right? It's just a more sophisticated way of talking about analysis and really thinking deeply and critically until we come to a place of understanding and knowing, and it may take years, but sometimes you'll eventually get there if you're lucky, if any of us are lucky. Pitjalnik is the concept of being good or kind, and so when we asked people how they would talk about ethics and being ethical, Pitjalnik was sort of one of the terms that people had talked about. Anyway, it all comes together in a model. It's published also in the Journal of Critical Indigenous Studies, if you want to learn more about it. But those values underpin a model that's centered on children and families and communities. And we just remind ourselves that anybody can be involved in research when we're all working together for a collective good. people often ask what makes a good researcher, and this, this concept of Inuit, which Nancy will talk about, is really the lifelong process of creating a good, capable human being who can also be a researcher. So in the academic system, am I just hitting buttons at random? It's just auto advancing. It's telling me to hurry up. Yeah, it is just auto doing it. Okay, so I'll just skip ahead. But the concept of being a good researcher starts in childhood, that someone is raised to be kind or compassionate, observant, and caring for others, and it doesn't necessarily come with 4 or 6 or even 50 years of academic training. So what we do then, this is a good example from a different publication of how statistics about the Arctic are often at the superficial level, and what people fail to capture about the Arctic is what's underneath, in the analogy of the iceberg. There's so much more underneath than you see on the surface. And so this is the area that we occupy. We're looking underneath and we're diving deep into what's happening in our communities and why and how that relates to history and the future and so on. So we work on community-based projects. We don't go anywhere we're not invited, even in our own territory. We wait to be invited by community members who have questions, and that may result then in a community-based project or a few communities, and we work together from there on whatever topic they want. And so over the years, that's looked like climate change, mental health, trauma, education, everything. And then we have a portion of what we're doing that is territory-wide. So like something like end-of-life care, palliative care, how those services are delivered across our territory are sort of universal issues. Definitely we've been looking at the unintended consequences of COVID-19 across the territory and so on. So another portion of what we do is at that level and at the circumpolar level. So after all these years, 18 years of running a research institute, we're not just obviously doing research that sits on a shelf. It's evolved into all of these programs and public health interventions. We provide a number of services, and now we're providing space. That's like our next great intervention, is there just isn't enough space and infrastructure in our communities to deliver the programs that are created by and for community members, and so now we're building a building. So we're just going to keep going, and of course we're working in research, right across the landscape, across the Arctic, with multiple collaborators. We develop courses and deliver them in research methodologies, and we have trainee and mentorship programs, and we're working to find solutions to the space issue through housing, community wellness centers, et cetera. So some of the things that we're doing that are kind of neat in the academic space are we're using and sharing innovative and responsive research methods. So that's instead of sort of the traditional academic way of going like, this is the best gold standard and this is the way you do a research study, and it not really aligning with the values of a community around how you do research. We've been very responsive and new ways of looking at study design, for example, or consent processes. We've been leading a program of ethics and ethics courses. We have our own REB at Qaujigiartiit, and it's called the Ethics Katimai. And then we've developed graduate programs, and we're teaching everywhere, and we're kind of all over the place. So we're coming for you. I'll just wrap up very quickly here and hand it over to Sephora. So what makes us unique? We're from our communities. We're self-established. Where people have come to us. Actually, people probably come to us on a weekly basis looking for partnerships like, I'm curious about this, can I work with you? And we'll say, what's your relationship to our communities and what's your motivation and why? And there's a very rigorous process. And so that used to be more the case. Now it's us reaching out to others to form those relationships and connections that we want to have with people that we know we can trust and work with. And we have just so much creative and exciting stuff happening. We're working with institutions around the world, and we're really part of this growing movement of research in the North. What we've accomplished over the last several years is we've, as I've said, been elevating Inuit research methods and community pathways to health and well-being into our systems, into the academy. We've brought over 50 million Canadian dollars in research and training funding into the territory since our inception, that's not small. That wouldn't have come otherwise if our institute hadn't have been there. So we're very proud of that. We've had more than 1,500 Nunavut come through our courses and training programs, and we've had more than 120 staff over the years working for our organization, and students as summer students as well. So we're very excited and proud about what we've accomplished so far. So thank you, Qaujigiartiit. That was all from me, and I'll hand it over to Sephora, and I'll see if I can figure this out.
Thank you.
How do you get out now to, it's on the mic screen. Oh, okay. Right, okay. Okay, play, how do I play it?
That little thing.
Okay.
Perfect.
Hi, at it.
Yeah. So, can everyone hear me clearly?
Mm-hmm.
I have a little bit of a soft voice sometimes. Uhaka romayunga. Kuyalilakatunga uvani katagun nakama. Uhaka tolunga tamaunga. Dartmouth College mo. I just wanted to first off say thank you for the warm welcome. I feel so fortunate to be able to come and speak to you all today and to share some of our experiences and what we've learned, and about the work that I do in Iqaluit at the Nunavut Near. And so I'll just be speaking a bit about the Nunavut Near and my role. And so I'll just give you a bit of introduction to myself. I like to share a bit about where I come from and who I am. And also what we do at the Nunavut Near, and provide a bit of an overview of what makes us unique. And so I am Sephora Mearns. I am originally from Panaktu, Nunavut, but I currently live in Iqaluit with my family here, my husband and my 2 daughters. And this is on a hill on our way home from our cabin, which oversees Gwen's cabin spot. And so, yeah, I'm a trained educator. I got my Bachelor of Education from Nunavut College, and I also have an undergrad from Carleton University in Ottawa. And so I've worked in Inuit health research since 2009, where I worked at the National Aboriginal Health Organization in Ottawa, and I spent some time as well at Qaujigiartiit Inuit Women of Canada. And I'm now in my 11th year at Qaujigiartiit. And much like many people in our communities, I play many roles. And these roles are what helps guide us in our research and in our work, and really helps enrich our research. So I'm a parent, I'm an educator, a researcher, a children's book author, I'm going to throw that in there. I just published a new one. You could check it out. I'm a seamstress and a volunteer. So, like I said, we play a lot of roles in our communities, and this is what Gwen was talking about when we talk about capacity. The capacity that exists in our communities, the individuals that do the work in our communities wear many different hats and play many different roles in contributing to the well-being of our communities. And when we talk about systemic issues that are barriers to allowing that capacity to really have the impact, is some of the things that we hope to address through the NEAR. So the Nunavut NEAR is a network that brings together 4 Inuit-led community organizations to build a strong foundation for community-led health research and Inuit leadership in research through training and education. And my role is to support each of these organizations. So the NEAR program is funded by the Canadian Institutes for Health Research through the Institute for Indigenous Peoples' Health. And the Nunavut NEAR is one of 9 or 10 NEARs across Canada. And so this funding is typically held at a post-secondary institution. And so Qaujigiartiit is one of 2 community-based organizations to hold these funds. And so each organization that makes up our collective has decades of experience in leading innovative community-led research and programming in areas such as health and wellness, climate change, land-based programming, and arts-based mental health initiatives. And so where these communities are situated, there's 26 communities in Nunavut, and Nunavut is the white, for those who do not know. So there's 26 communities in Nunavut, and these are the 3 communities where our NEAR hub sites are situated. However, 2 of the organizations, Aqimavik in Arvet and Clyde River, Ilisaq Civic and Itak Research Centre, these organizations represent their communities, and in Iqaluit, Qaujigiartiit and Qaujigiartiit represent Nunavut as a whole. However, even though those 2 communities work specifically with their community, they help inform, and we learn from them in their research and their work. So through this partnership, each hub site leads their own research and incorporates their own capacity building initiatives in their work. And my role is to administer the funds and support in overarching initiatives and coordinating functions of this program. And I will be going over some of the activities that take place. But today I will be sharing about how the NEAR has allowed us to break down barriers and allow us to develop creative strategies to strengthen Inuit research capacity through training and mentorship for researchers across the entire career continuum. From undergraduate to postdoctoral levels, which we hope can further enhance Inuit-led research in health and well-being in Nunavut. So our objectives, these are our objectives, and we want to build on existing research capacity in Nunavut. Like Gwen said, we know the capacity exists, and we want to strengthen that and support that. We want to support community-based health research, so research that is being done by Nunavummiut, the people of Nunavut, for our communities, for Nunavummiut. We want to develop an environment that will support Inuit community leadership increase awareness, capacity, and relevance of Inuit health research. So just being able to stand here and share from my experience and just being able to do this is really incredible, and I'm really happy to be here today. We want to improve the understanding of Inuit health research paradigms because historically, as Gwen mentioned, we've always been the subject of research. Without the recognition of the important research approaches that already exists within our communities, and we want to carve out the space to allow for those approaches. So we want to demonstrate leadership in conducting and disseminating health research in Canada from our perspective, and ultimately to create an enduring foundation for future generations of Inuit researchers from Nunavut. So we do this by focusing on 4 core activity areas. So strengthening capacity in Inuit research. This is done in various ways. Each near hub site holds 1 to 2 student trainee positions that work on various research projects within their organization. And then at Qaujigiartiit, we have created a course that we fondly call Research Week or Research Party Time, where it is a week-long personal and professional development week for early career researchers and students, where they can learn from Inuit and Western ways of knowing and bridging that together in learning how to prepare sealskins, learning sewing techniques, learning through stories and songs, learning the teachings from the khulliq, the oil lamp, and also learning having important conversations on ethics and what it looks like to do ethical research in our community. So another activity is enhancing community-driven participatory research by conducting research that is led by our communities to address community needs directly. Advancement of co-learning strategies and models. We're exploring, through the year, we've been able to explore and utilize Inuit ilisait, which is Inuit methods of teaching, in our learning and training opportunities and mentorship in each of the hub sites. And so we also, what informs that as well is having our elder advisory committee meetings. And finally, advancing discourse in ethics. So through the year, we're able to have these really important conversations on what it means to do ethical research in our communities. And like Gwen also mentioned, it is the values. We're guided by these 5 Inuit Qaujigiartiit, these Inuit traditional values. And these values are what help ground us in the ways of knowing, thinking, and being. We want to support our students and trainees in being capable and mastering the skills and knowledge to conduct research in an ethical manner that are deeply rooted in these values. And so, what makes us unique? And I think what I'd like to share with you today is what makes this Inuit health research environment unique and enriching. And I when I think about this, I reflect back on a question. I was at the ArcticNet conference in Toronto in December, and I sat in a talk with Shilawak Kluche, and a student raised her hand and asked a question on how do we bring Inuit ways of knowing and learning to the forefront in a meaningful way, in a real way. As an Inuk student, she asked that question. And I think that really, really helped me understand and kind of set priorities of why we're doing this. And I think as researchers and supporters of early career researchers, we need to carve out the spaces for learning in both ways of knowing. And I know that we're still in the early days, but I'd like to share some of the observations from our first years. And these are 5 key pieces that we think that make us unique. And I'll share some of the activities that we've also accomplished. And I hope that today you can leave with a greater appreciation for how we can bring Inuit knowledge into these academic settings and to support health research. First, self-determination. First and foremost, I think, because the Nunavut NEAR is one of 2 NEAR programs that is housed in an independent community research institute, we have the freedom to be nimble and responsive without the time-consuming bureaucratic processes that may burden traditional academic institutions. And in our context, trainees and students are engaged in their community and mobilizing on the ground. So to us, our remoteness is an advantage because it allows us to be in the immersive learning and knowledge exchange for our learners. Two, our Inuit values form the heart of the Nunavut NEAR, which is grounded in the concepts I mentioned earlier. And these concepts guide all aspects of day-to-day activities and strategic directions. And we continuously aim to create the space that reflects our values, knowledge, and ilisait usit, our methods of teaching. It is through this work that our observations have been that every time we gather our students and we talk about these things, creating these spaces, the reflections are always about how transformative the learning has been. These are transformative spaces, and these spaces are really key to someone like me, having had to leave my community to go to university. We want to create spaces that are centered around people because the people are the heart of community well-being. And we are discovering, and I think we've always known this, I think, that when we carve out these spaces where we can incorporate land-based learning, Inuit science, skill development, and bringing together Western and Inuit ways of knowing into the learning space, these are the transformative spaces that support personal and professional growth. And I think as an Indigenous student, as an Inuk student, that when we are able to feed that need for learning, that will enrich us and help us grow as researchers and community members. And so when I graduated from university, I felt that I missed out on key knowledge and learning within my culture. And I began to pursue these key skills development in sealskin preparation and the knowledge that surrounds that. And I sought out those opportunities to immerse myself in that learning. And it allowed me to grow as an individual and allowed me to situate myself in my community. And it also gave me a deeper understanding of where I came from and what my role is as an educator. And so that is kind of how Research Week grew. And this week-long course that we hope to certify as a master's level certification, where students can learn through story and song, community-based research methods, ethical standards and guidelines in research, sealskin preparation. And this, when we bring all the instructors for those elements of this course, we are able to, it is growth that can occur across paradigms and generations. This point is a key point for me in what makes us unique at the Nunavut NEAR is that research for action. And I always like to tell the story. I don't know how much time I have, but I feel like I'm going a little over time. But I like to tell the story. We put out a news release when the NEAR, when we received the NEAR funding to announce that we were going to start this work. And the article read that the NEAR aims to conduct research for action. And there was a comment, and I know you're not supposed to read the comments in news articles, because we all know. And basically, and it was wishful thinking that you would think that research would actually initiate action. However, it is through the NEAR that we are actually seeing research for change in real time on the ground. For example, the Qaujigiartiit Society in Qaujigiartiit, which is a hub site of the NEAR, has developed an Qaujigiartiit framework, which describes a consensus process for developing and moving forward in decision making, which holds at its heart the best interests of the collective. And the Qaujigiartiit approach embeds in its very existence the means for creating research and wellness programs that are truly responsive to the needs for the community. And I just got word that they are hoping it is through this process that they have developed a wellness program for their community that they will be piloting in the fall. And our last but not least, it's our relationships. Our communities have a holistic worldview, and we are all interconnected and interrelated. And the Nunavut NEAR, I think we talk about this relationship to land, and the Nunavut NEAR follows the Inuit year calendar in our workplace and operations, where we hold Qaujigiartiit governing committee meetings, courses, gatherings in alignment with the patterns of the harvesting calendar to support the best possible relationship building through collective harvesting and sharing practices. Or we host these gatherings during downtimes where members of our collective can attend without disrupting the flow of their own family's harvesting calendar. And I always use the example that you probably won't find me in April. And so this brings me to the end. The Nunavut NEAR is still in its infancy stage, but I hope our next steps will be to continue to create these learning opportunities for early career researchers, and hoping for more collaboration to continue to bring Inuit knowledge and approaches and worldviews to the mainstream academic environment. Nakumbi.
Do you want help with the slides?
Oh.
Oh yeah, you got it.
I'm glad she has it, because I don't.
Very nice.
Kuya namita tusaksaw po nga.
Nah. Ate tulsaw ka na ulit.
Check 1, 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll have to hold it.
Namat to kay.
Check one. Okay. It's not going to be loud enough. Nancy Mike nguyunga kuyan na may tamani gun nakama amma kuvesut tunga tamani kasi. My name is Nancy Mike. I feel very welcomed here at Dartmouth and very fortunate to be here presenting for you, and thank you for coming. I'm going to be talking a bit about Inunguinak, making of a capable human being. So I'll just talk a bit about the outline. What is Inunguinak? I'll be talking about the 6 principles of Inunguinak, purpose of Inunguinak, and influences within families, communities, and workplaces, Inuit stories and impacts of colonization, and then how that ties into reconnecting, and then I'll leave it open for questions. Just to tell you a bit about myself, I am Inuk, what the Canadian government used to call us Eskimo, but we don't use that term. We are Inuit, and I did my BSc in Arctic nursing at the Nunavut College, and then I have been with Qaujigiartiit as a research associate for family and community health. I've worked as a nurse. I'm also a musician, songwriter, visual artist, and also an author. I wrote a children's book like Sephora. I'm a mother of four kids, and I have a dog. And I was born in Iqaluit, raised in Panoktok, and now living back in Iqaluit. And I've been with QHRC since September 2019. So what is Inunguinak? Inunguinak, the term in Inuktitut, literally translates to making of a capable human being. So when we talk about Inunguinak and in the Inuit child rearing program, we look at the roles of parents in raising and guiding children. So reflection on colonial policies which impacted us as people, but also families living in our homelands, and then rebuilding the role of extended family and community in Inunguinak, and then extending social support. So we really look at relationship building, importance of the land in our lives, and wellness. That's one thing that, being at Dartmouth, a lot of the same kind of repetitive thing that I've been hearing is that people want to feel connected to the land in order to kind of incorporate that into doing your work or in how you learn. So that's been very interesting for me, and an observation that is dear to me. And then we also talk about the stages of child development, more so kind of tied to Western way of looking at child development, but also incorporating elders' views on what that looks like within Inuit child rearing, Inuit perspectives and on Inuit child rearing and family relationships, Inuit naming and kinships. I often talk about my late father. He passed away in 2013, and when my second child was born, we named her after him, and her name's Levi. And so she carries characteristics that my late father had, and she has told stories of who my father was constantly amongst our community, our family, and then within us as well. So that kind of ties into who she's becoming as a person. It has many, I guess, a holistic way of adding to her, becoming a capable human. And then Inunguinak, we always look at being heart-centered. So heart-centered approach in not only child rearing, but when we're learning, we want to teach to the heart, because being compassionate or being able to understand each other as people allows us to move forward in a better way when we're heart-centered. And then we do a lot of storytelling within the program, so revitalizing Inuit stories and recognizing the power of story in our lives. Gwen touched on that a bit earlier. And I'm realizing that that's one thing I do quite often now. Like as I get older, I'm often telling stories of my own life or my parents' lives, for example. And then practicing and adopting positive life habits and role modeling. So Gwen was talking about how developing or living a good life or developing habits to live a good life, that's something we often look at in Inungwinak. Practice life skills grounded in Inuit Qaujigiartiit. Inuit Qaujigiartiit are Inuit values or knowledge that has been passed down from generation to generation. So we often look at that. Relationship communication skills for spouses, family, and children, and then setting expectations for children and ourselves. Then we also look at a bit about like budgeting and then exploring ourselves and our actions through reflection. And then lastly, we usually have individuals cook together and eating together. So healthy eating and family nutrition being one of the topics. So the six principles of Inungwinak, starting with the first one, develop habits for living a good life. I just touched on that a bit. When you look at the holistic perspective of this, I told a story this morning to some of the students about how when you're a child, like I was raised, just imagine being on the tundra where there's no trees and you're hiking and animals are a part of our lives. We cannot grow vegetables on our land, so hunting is a huge part of our lives. And so when we're hiking, for example, we'll come across a piece of bone, like animal bone, and as children, we're taught to flip that bone as soon as we see it, because they get tired of being in one position, and that tells you that all things have a purpose. And so when we're flipping that bone, it seems like a simple action when we're kids, but as we all get older, you start to have, aha moments where, you weren't just being taught to flip that bone. You were being taught to observe your land, your surroundings, respect your family, respect animals, respect yourself. So it becomes a bigger picture. It's a holistic view of what wellness and health looks like. So second one is rise above hardship through continual solution seeking. So when we talk about, say, like Northern Canada was colonized much later than many places. So like my grandfather's generation, they were forced to settle in our community in the 1950s. So myself and Sapor's generation are the first people that didn't get to be born out on the land or live on the land. And when you think about like what impacts colonization had, we kind of have to go above that hardship and think about how we can move forward. So being, continuously seeking for a solution for whatever hardship you're going through is one of the Inungwinak principles. And then third, build a strong moral character, being heart-centered. I touched on that earlier as well. And then fourth, show compassion, serve others, and pay attention to relationship building. So I think that naming is so simple, but it can be so big because when we name a child when they're born, they tend to build relationships within our communities because of that name, that the person that have passed away and knew many people within our communities or, helped in a way that, other people want to respect that person. So then they go to that newborn baby to build on those relationships. So relationship building becomes a big part of Inungwinak as a way to move forward. And then fifth is recognize the uniqueness of each individual. We're all unique, and so we look at that when we're talking about Inungwinak or to make a capable human being. It's important to recognize each of us as unique. And then 6, continually make improvements until one becomes able. So whether it be a newborn, we teach them skills, knowledge, whatever it may be, to become able, but also, like, say, I'm 35 years old and I'm still seeking and trying to find ways to become able as a human being. And then that's going to be a lifelong learning journey, even up until, the day I die, for example. It's always it's a lifelong journey. So the purpose of the Inungwinak program is to revitalize Inungwinak, so making of a capable human being, for our lives today. And when we have the training sessions, we often create the space for people so that healing is a part of it. We tend to be, try to do work around being trauma informed, so that healing is a topic around it. And then 3rd is to rebuild the role of extended family and community in child rearing. I just wanted to share this quote by Qaujigiartiit from Aqviet. We want to understand how Inuit in the past were successful at teaching their children about the Inuit Qaujigiartiit principles that helped them back then, because we feel the same principles can help our children today. To look at things from this perspective and continue to develop the skills that will help them to have a productive life and to be helpful to others in need. So Inungwinak oftentimes that, like, say, if you were impacted by colonization and you were stripped of your knowledge or your parenting ways, it's important to bring the Inuit Qaujigiartiit values back in order to kind of proceed in ways how to help the next generation. So with Inuit stories, that's one thing that I'm learning to do, but also have learned over the years, especially working at Qaujigiartiit, how there is so much knowledge built into stories, especially Inuit stories. So unika Qaujigiartiit, the philosophy of story, the power and meaning of storytelling. There's, like, say, when I was a child, my father would tell me a story and I would grasp onto things that I only understood as a child. But as the story was told to me as I grow older, I grasped onto new knowledge that maybe I didn't quite understand when I was younger. So there's always something new to learn from the same story, because our understanding is, it becomes bigger as we become more experienced in our lives. So the power of story is very important in the work that we do. And so it not only helps us, it helps us to revitalize some old stories that maybe have not been told many times. So that's what we do with our stories. And I touched a bit on, impacts of colonization. It becomes super important to reconnect ourselves, understanding the need for healing and support, basic ideas and referrals. So then looking to the past in order to successfully go forward, and then family relationships and kinships as the strength of Inuit Qaujigiartiit. So it becomes a holistic kind of approach where healing is so important, the knowledge, the stories, to become a capable human, but also to reconnect us as people. Kuya Nami, thank you. If you have any questions, and all of us will be open to answering them.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open to questions, if you guys are up for that. Just a few questions. So if anyone has, we'll bring a mic to you if we can hear your question also for the webinar if you don't have. Does anyone want to ask a question of the group? Oh, thank you. Dawn in the back.
Thank you so much for this. This was not only broadening, but I keep thinking about everything I do throughout the day now, so thank you for that. One of the elements that you talked about was this goal of collective good. And I think that certainly even in Western culture, that is a goal. Many times the protocols in either our jobs or in our homes don't support that. And I was wondering, what does that look like? How have you made that part of the working version of what you do in the day-to-day, institutionally, not just on an individual level? Thank you.
Ooh. You didn't go for an easy question, Dawn. Everyone can feel free to weigh in on this too. I think, so in our day-to-day, well, for one, our offices are child-friendly. All the babies, we have 14 children among us. We're very family-friendly and family-oriented. We have flexible schedules, so we're working around our community commitments and our families and good harvesting days. Like, yeah, if the weather's good and we can go clam digging, we're all gone, you know? So that, and then I think a very specific example might be how during COVID, you know, we are a research institute, and I don't think that maybe in other places like a research institute would close down and then all start like feeding people and taking fish to the, like we all just sort of pivoted to like frontline, I guess. Like we were sharing food, we were developing COVID care kits, we were in isolation packages for kids, and like we were just, you know, helping everyone in the community because we were all in it together. I don't know if you have other examples, please, Nancy. Yeah.
I just want to touch on how, just imagine living in a harsh environment and having to survive. You're not only going to be relying on yourself, you're going to be relying on others. So working for the common good and doing work for the common good is a survival tactic. And it only makes sense to put that into our workplaces. And I think that's what we do.
Mm-hmm. I think, and talking about what Nancy was, I guess, touching on what Nancy had talked about with the concept of inunguinak. These inunguinak philosophies, the philosophies of how to raise a capable human being, that is very much at the core, at an individual level of how we've been raised. And I think for an example is, I was in a course a couple weeks ago, and our elder instructor was talking about how we were talking about terminology in Inuktitut, and we were talking about Qaujigiartiit, these the guide. How would you translate?
Like a role or a guide?
It is our role as individuals that we are taught. So through inunguinak, we are taught these roles, and Nancy touched on these expectations or responsibilities that we have, and that is at the core of our responsibilities of how we've been raised. And so I think that's how it translates into our work on a daily basis, what our day-to-day work life looks like, or our families, and that is how we've been taught. And so I think when we were going back to my elder instructor, she was talking about whenever there was an animal caught in the camp, it was the role of the child to go fetch the family to come and eat, or if when this elder, when she was a child, their families would go to the trading post or the community, and they would come back to their camp, and they would have tea and flour, and every time they came back, each child had to deliver to each tent or each kammak a part of what they had brought back, so that you are taking care of your community in that way. And that was just one small example of how she was taught that you take care of your community members. And I think these are still practices that these are some things that we still practice today in COVID or in our families, in our communities.
And like when you give that child that role, it instills that confidence in them as well, because when you deliver meat to an elder, for example, the elder's going to respond with an amazing joy and kind of scream out of joy and really, and encourage the child to continue doing that. So it becomes a full circle.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, I will say the phrase that has stood with me. Gwen kindly came into my class, and I've now repeated it in my head, and I will repeat it now here, which was I just think is so beautiful, and everyone who's heard it is now inspired. But it is what you said is at the core of what you do is teach the heart, the brain will follow. So I thank you for inspirational presentations, your inspirational words, and your again. I will take from this. It's not the deficit culture, and I think this was really important. There is so much happening that we at Dartmouth can learn from, and that's why we bring you here, and we hope we can continue this conversation of learning from what is community-led research, what is Inuit knowledge-led research, things that we need to understand as we try to go out and create more sustainability, equality, a peace in the world, which I hope all of our students want to do. It is bringing together these ways of knowing different people's different knowledge systems and learning together for how we do this together. We just have the one planet, and these are the conversations of how we reach out to one another, how we learn from one another, that I'm very honored for you to have brought to us, and I can't wait to continue them. Thank you all for being here and sharing, and I look forward to seeing you again too.